The first time I noticed the timers was on the subway, 100 tiny digital suns hovering above strangers' heads, counting down like silent metronomes to the end of everything. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the odd, private panic of being the only person who didn't have one. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 32. I mix sound for indie films. I drink terrible coffee because it's cheap and because routine comforts me. Up until the day the clocks appeared, death was the kind of thing you honored at a funeral and otherwise left to the metaphors. Then the world got literal. They showed up overnight. Nobody agreed on the when because time is slippery when you're all looking. Some people woke up to them hovering faintly above their mirrors. Others say the first public sighting was at a baseball game, a kid pointing up as his father's number ticked towards something small and inevitable. Within a week, every human being on Earth had a digital countdown hanging over their crown. Days, hours, minutes, seconds. Some were long and arrogant, decades like distant islands. Some were short, like supermarket receipts. The timers were precise in a way that made priests and scientists both uneasy. Not "your time will come someday," but "your time will come on 20460912 at 14:0318." Cold, exact, and impossible to bargain with. You learn to read a city differently when you can see its endings. People started stepping around those with short timers the way you step around potholes. There were rituals, the shy whisper when you passed a tiny number, the public funerals for people whose countdowns ticked to zero on a Tuesday afternoon. Apps popped up to aggregate timers. Governments tried to regulate them. Conspiracy forums bubbled with theories, divine intervention, alien surveillance, a mass hallucination born of global trauma. None of it mattered to the timers. They just kept counting. My sister, Jenna, was the first to tell me what it did to a relationship. "It's like living with a calendar carved into someone's forehead," she said one night at her kitchen island, folding and unfolding the same napkin while her own timer read 17 years and some change. She and her boyfriend argued about every small thing, as if their time budget were a ledger. "You micro-plan grief now," she told me. "You calculate apologies the way you calculate rent." I tried to laugh and failed because I couldn't feel the timer's shape on my own life. I could see everyone else's fate as clearly as street signs, but my own head was blank. There was nothing floating over me, no LEDs, no numbers, no future stamped across my brow. I checked mirrors, phone cameras, shop reflections. I stood under street lamps at midnight and turned my head in slow arcs, searching for some ghostly readout. Nothing. At first, I thought it was a technical error, a glitch for 1 in 7 billion. Maybe it would show up in a week, maybe in a year. Maybe I was exempt. People told me to be grateful. The Untimed, it turned out, could be a listener in a way that fixed death people were sometimes too terrified to be. I started to keep an oral archive. I carried a recorder and a cheap notebook and asked people to tell me one thing they wanted remembered if their timer ran out in an hour. They told me about the taste of their mother's soup, a joke their father used to make, the exact curve of a lover's smile. Some whispered political confessions that would get activists killed. Others spoke of mundane domestic triumphs. The act of being told a life in fragments changed me. It made me feel like a magazine in a waiting room where others fold their troubles into pages and hand them over. And still, the absence on my own head pulled. I began to dream, not normal dreams, but precise little movies that felt like premonitions. I woke up seeing myself at a funeral I had not yet attended, standing with no clock above the casket, while everyone else's displays pulsed a synchronized grief. In the dream, hands that wore numbers trembled and searched for mine in the dark. I started recording these dreams the way I recorded my neighbor's last wishes.
Pattern recognition is a comfort to people whose jobs are to edit sound into sense. Maybe if I collected enough of these little clips, a pattern would emerge. And it did. Not a pattern of a date, I still had no number, but a pattern in the way people treated me when a timer hit 0. When a man's countdown extinguished in a deli one Tuesday, the automatic sympathy of the crowd folded into a bureaucratic rhythm. First shock, then the official closure, then the anxious auctions of life. I watched vendors calculating the economic fallouts of small deaths, like men trimming loose threads. The gap between the ritual of mourning and the calculus of the living yawed wider every day. I started to understand that the timers had changed the currency of empathy. You could buy grief credit by predicting the loss. I couldn't. That's when the hunters arrived. They called themselves continuity advocacy. Their literature was neat and persuasive. Societies rely on predictable mortality. Unpredictable mortality is destabilizing. Untimed individuals must be integrated or removed. They lobbied for a registry, ostensibly to help people like me manage our affairs. They had lawyers and soft-spoken spokespersons who used words like responsibility and stewardship. Their agents visited my building under the color of gentle concern. They wanted to help me plan. They offered trusts, guardianship plans, a curated legal future, so my lack of a date wouldn't become a public liability. I knew what they really wanted the first time one of them brought a scanner. It was a clean little device that hummed like a refrigerator, minimalist and harmless. He said it scanned for anomalies in temporal signatures and would help reassure the public. He promised confidentiality. He smiled with the confidence of a man who believes systems favor the people who design them.
I refused. He left and then returned with other men who had less smile and more insistence. The building superintendent, a man who had tolerated my late-night mixing projects because I paid rent on time, told them, reluctantly, that he could not legally bar them from the stairwell. The agents offered money to the super to facilitate access. They offered me a sealed envelope with legal forms written in language designed to feel like an embrace. They suggested a clinical evaluation at a center for special cases. They told me softly that the world was safer when everyone was legible. "You can't make me show you a clock I don't have," I told them. "You don't get to measure me by what you fear." One of the agents traced the curve of my jaw with a fingertip as if reading Braille. "We only ask what is necessary," he said. "We must have continuity." I began to receive notes under my door. "We can help. We can protect you. You are not alone. You are different." The messaging split society into two halves, those who saw me as an anomaly to be reverenced and those who saw me as a contagion of uncertainty. The more frightened people became, the more they supported strong measures. The more compassionate people became, the more they organized to shield me. I found myself at the center of a moral geometry I had never chosen. The night they tried to take me, my friend Leela, who taught me to see endings not as termini but as frames, knocked on every door in the building until she found enough people with numbers who still believed in kindness. Together, in a messy human barricade, we answered the intercom and explained to the suited men that there was no legal precedent for what they wanted. We treated them like bureaucrats who had read rules but not lived a life. They left, or rather they backed off, with the quiet impatience of a plan repurposed. The super later told me, with a kind of weary apology, that he had been offered a promotion to move apartments if he cooperated. He chose instead to keep his conscience and his rent. That night I sat on the roof with Leela, and we watched the city like people watching a staged play. She had a countdown that read 44 years and an easy smile that, in the rooftop wind, felt domestic and fierce. "You know what I think," she said, leaning against the chimney. "I think you don't have a timer because you're a mirror. People see their mortality reflected in you and they panic." "Or they see themselves in reverse," I said. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you're a choice. The universe gave you a blank so we'd stop outsourcing remembrance. Maybe it wants us to speak the names ourselves." I like that reading, though I don't know if it's true. Sometimes the world gives you metaphors that fit like clothes. I kept recording, because that is what I do. People sat with me and told me their flavors of goodbye and what they wanted rearranged in the world when they were gone. I taped lectures and love letters and grocery lists.
I told Jenna once that I was afraid I would never know how to die because I had never been given the script. She took my hand and said, "You already know how. You just have to practice." Months passed. The world adjusted to the new visibility of endings. There were scandals and kindnesses and policy fights that never quite resolved. Continuity advocacy lost its major donors when a viral campaign revealed they had targeted vulnerable families with scams. Lila organized a small network of listeners and archivists. We called ourselves the Keepers in a private joke that felt unnecessarily grand. We went into neighborhoods that had been abandoned because too many small-timers had reached zero and made oral histories into public memory. There is a strange kind of power in the act of speaking someone's life back to them after it's gone. I still do not have a number above my head. Sometimes I wonder if one will ever appear. Sometimes I imagine waking one morning to find digits hovering like frost. Sometimes, when someone with a short timer asks me what I would do if mine appeared tomorrow, I tell them the truth. I would call them and I would listen, and I would tell them everything I had remembered about them so their story would exist in more than a glowing counter. That, ultimately, is the work I accept. The problem of my missing countdown is less an absence than an invitation. Others wear their ends like maps. I carry an obligation. If you ever stand under a stranger's number and feel anything like vertigo, don't avert your eyes. Speak their name. Ask them what they'd like to be remembered for. Take notes. Record it on anything that will last longer than your fear. We live our days in the shadow of numbers now, but numbers are not the same as memory. The timers can tell you when a life ends. They cannot tell you what it was. That has to be done by the living. If I have no date floating above me, maybe that's because I'm meant to spend whatever time I have learning how to hold other people's stories. If immortality is the absence of a clock, then it becomes less a gift and more a task. I don't know when my end is. I only know that while I'm here, I will keep the voices of the gone and the soon-to-be gone. I will keep telling them back until someone believes they were more than a number.
"It could be worse," they said. "Maybe you're immortal." Strangers on social media called me blessed. A few called me cursed. Some religious groups started showing up at my door with pamphlets that smelled like incense and bad decisiveness. The problem with being the only one without a timer isn't that it makes you feel invincible. It's that it makes you feel unmoored. Death defines people now the way a hometown used to. Without a date to measure against, how do you prioritize? How do you hold a conversation when everyone else can give you a countdown and you can't reciprocate? When Jenna asked, "What do you want?" I realized I had never been forced to answer with anything except guilty improvisation. I tried practical things first. I saw doctors. They ran blood work, brain scans, sympathetic assays. They pronounced me physically healthy and ethically curious. I went to bioethicists who wore expensive shoes and asked me, politely, whether I had always been this untethered or if something traumatic had removed the imprimatur of death from me. I went to neurologists who scrolled through images of my hippocampus like men thumbing an old library book. The machines showed nothing. The timers were not neurological hallucinations. They were visible to anyone with eyes and common sense. Still, my head was bare. Then society got curious. Curiosity, when it concerns mortality, turns fast into control. The government wanted to study me. Corporations wanted to license me. Churches wanted to baptize me. The tabloids wanted me to tell them what it felt like to be an immortal scandal. I refused most requests, not out of nobility so much as exhaustion. You only get asked one kind of question when you don't have a timer. When will you die? The answer, I don't know, is less a refusal than a defect in the social software. It unsettled people. There was a darker seam to it. People began to whisper that I was dangerous. If you had a timer, your death could be scheduled, managed, insured. You were legible. I was a blank page. The extremists said that the untimed destabilized predictive modeling. Who would pay their debts? Who would inherit what? Who would stand accountable? One protest in front of my flat employed a banner that read, "No exceptions." A woman in the crowd pointed a camera at my window and shouted about fairness. A man handed me a pamphlet with figures on it calculating actuarial risk like they were praying with a pencil. But there was another side to being untimed, one quieter and more tender. People came to me with secrets they would not tell a calendar. A neighbor whose countdown read 3 months sat on my stoop at 2 a.m. and admitted she'd always wanted to try solo travel before the number hit 0. She wanted someone who wouldn't judge her for taking the leap. A teacher with 2 years left asked me to help him record a series of lectures for his students, not because he feared being forgotten, but because he wanted to compress his kindness into an archive.